All right, welcome back everybody for our final session. We're going to introduce our last panel in just a minute, but we're going to start with our last video message of the series you've been seeing throughout the event from former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe.
Leaders, and welcome to your conference. My name is Terry McAuliffe. I was the 72nd governor of the great Commonwealth of Virginia, former chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And I've been fighting for the Democratic Party for over 46 years. I fight for this great party because it is our party that fights for people every single day. And that's what I did as governor. When I took office, I inherited the largest deficit in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia, left over by a Republican governor and Republican legislature. I ran for governor to build the new Virginia economy, and I got to work. The largest deficit became the largest surplus 4 years later when I left office. I worked my heart out every single day. I was the most traveled governor in American history, 35 trade missions all over the world. I recruited 2,100 companies to move into Virginia and created over 200,000 new jobs, high-paying jobs. And that was my mission as governor. And I would tell everybody, I want to have a record investment in education. I want to have a record investment in healthcare. I want to build the most roads. You cannot do any of that unless you got a strong, booming economy. And I could tell parents every single day that I got out of bed and when their child finally graduated from school, they were going to have a high-paying job for them. In fact, when I left office, I had over, believe it or not, I had over 55,000 open jobs in cybersecurity, starting pay $85,000 a year. So I guess my message to all of you is pick what you're going to do and then fight like a dog to deliver for the folks in your respective areas. That's what I did. I built the new Virginia economy. I leaned in on economic issues and built one of the strongest economies in the history of our state, thereby allowing me to invest in all the priorities that matter to the Democratic Party. But I also leaned in on the social issues. I had a record number of vetoes, more vetoes than any other governor, stopping, rolling back women's rights and all the other insanity that the Republicans pushed through. And probably my finest moment, we had a 114-year-old racist Jim Crow law that if you committed a felony, which was $100, you never voted for the rest of your life. I used my executive authority and erased a 114-year-old law and gave 206,000 people back the right to vote, making them full citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia, lifting them up. So as you're in your conference, think about the things you can do to help people. That's why you got elected, and you only live once. So swing for the fences every single day. People are going to tell you, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I just barreled right through it. That's what Democrats do. We deliver. Good luck at the conference, and I hope to see you soon.
All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for rejoining us. Again, for our final panel, we'll close on the main theme from today in terms of navigating this situation we're in, and we close with a big topic, which is our economic outlook for states and cities moving forward. This panel will focus on helping leaders understand the challenges that they're facing, and of course that includes the implementation, suspension, threats of tariffs, and all that has come with that. So really looking forward to this discussion. We are led by Rachael Heisler, NewDEAL leader and controller for the city of Pittsburgh since January of 2024. She's also an expert in sustainable public finance, really at all levels of government. She previously spent 7 years as a senior advisor at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. She is joined by Oakland County Executive David Coulter, who has served in that role since 2019. He's worked on balanced budgets every year with bipartisan support, has worked on a number of issues successfully: public transportation system improvements, housing trust fund investments, education and training for adults to get them into the careers that they will be successful in. And they are joined as well by Kellie Hock, who we're thrilled to have. She is senior counselor at McLarty, where she founded the firm's trade practice, an expert in that area. She spent almost a decade at the U.S. Foreign Service, working in the Department of State, as well as at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in the Office of the President, So please join me in welcoming the Controller from Pittsburgh, our Oakland County Executive, and Kellie to the stage for our final discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today with Kellie, Meiman, Hock. I did it. You did it. Kellie, Meiman, Hock, and Dave Coulter. I'm here and sitting in the moderator role because, like you, I have more questions than answers. And so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to turn things over first to Kellie. First, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. She's served as a diplomat on behalf of the United States and primarily focused on trade and tariff policy in Brazil and other countries in South America. The first question I'm going to pose is, can you start by just trying to explain what the president is trying to do with tariff policy and how that impacts municipalities, whether they be cities, counties, or states across the country?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachael. And thank you so much. This is my first summit. It's been phenomenal. Great to get to know you all better in the group. Yeah, it's a little wacky. You know, the way that the president is approaching trade policy, it's very, very, very focused on tariffs. He believes that that is the primary tool of trade policy, and he's using them really judiciously. If you hear economists talk, and frankly, a lot of Democrats talk, they'll say, well, this policy is just stupid, because economically, it really doesn't make sense. It's not how global supply chains are organized, and it's hurting a lot of our companies, it's hurting a lot of our communities. That's not wrong, but what I'm gonna try to do, Rachael, is to just double click on your question, on the why. I think that to understand what we should do about this policy as Democrats, how to message on it, I think it's important to understand what the motivation is by Trump. And you know, I think first and foremost, and you saw this with his initial trade actions in March, it's to obtain leverage, and to obtain leverage not just on trade issues, but on non-trade issues, fentanyl, immigration, et cetera. Those are the actions that he initially took back in March against China, but then surprisingly against your neighbor, Canada, which shocked all of us, and Mexico against our USMCA partners. The Canadians saw that as an attempt to disrupt the status quo. That's the second motivator, disrupting the status quo. They're not over it. You can talk more about that, Dave, when you give us your perspective. Third is the justification that, frankly, as Democrats, you know, we've used or we've advocated for from time to time, and that's to protect industry. Unions in particular have in many cases advocated with us as Democrats for higher tariffs to protect industry. And so, you know, the difference in approach versus what I would say many of us have advocated for in the past versus what the president's doing, it's a blanket approach, increasing all tariffs versus taking a more sectoral approach. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The fourth one is reciprocity. And I don't ever talk about these reciprocal tariffs. I'm gonna hand this to you for a sec. You know, the long laundry list of reciprocal tariffs, which is like the Manhattan phone book. I don't talk about it without using air quotes, because supposedly the motivation was reciprocity to try to get at tariff peaks. Countries like Brazil, where I used to serve, a lot of their tariffs are really high. India, a lot of their tariffs are really high. This is something that, again, when I try to think about the tariffs in a way of how do we go forward from here rather than just saying they're stupid and don't make sense, I think about the motivations, but I also try to think about where is the head of the American people at, and what do they support? And I think on the reciprocity point, we have to recognize that, you know, we set up this post-World War II trading system to try to grow our economy and build our businesses because we knew we could compete. We knew we had the best companies and the best workers in the world, and we do. But does it make sense in today's day and age to have a 2.5% tariff on automobiles, which is what we had been applying, when China makes a pretty damn good EV for 10K? It probably doesn't make sense. I think the American people, I think all of your constituents don't think that makes sense. So the reciprocity point, while it's not what they did in practice, I think the idea behind it, the motivation behind it does make sense to the American people. Also deficits, addressing trade deficits, that is something that the formula for the reciprocal tariffs actually does try to do. And then revenue is the last motivation. And so I think for some of these tariffs, the 10% across the board tariffs, many of you, like Rachael, have budgets that you're thinking about. I think that a lot of these policies, if we're looking at, these reciprocal tariffs, those, in many cases are so high and are going to cause so much problems to our industry and to our tech companies and our services industries that they might be modified at some point in time. But the 10%, I think they are looking to try to keep those in place. So that's something that you really have to plan for. Just lastly, and then I'll stop. I think that between now and July 9th, which is when these reciprocal tariffs will be, that's the deadline for the 90-day extension of those tariffs. I think that we're going to see an increasingly sectoral approach, kind of moving from the blanket to the sectoral. And I think that you're seeing that with some of the carve-outs. Dates for you all that are managing budgets to think about. July 9th is one, when that 90 days for the review of the reciprocal tariffs comes due. After that July 9th date, we're going to see Canada, which I know is so important to you, Dave. The Canada-Mexico USMCA review, that will start. So we'll see some of those tariffs that have been applied against them taken a look at. And then ongoing, and I didn't mention China. I mean, what Democrats and Republicans, and I think all of our constituents agree upon, is that China's an issue. It's a national security threat. It's an economic security threat. This is what we should be addressing. Those tariffs are exponentially high at 145% plus in some cases. So that is the one that, for me, if I were sitting in your situation as New Deal leaders trying to figure out how to build a budget like you do every day, Rachael, that's the one I would be most concerned about, because that politically, because D's and R's agree, because constituents want it, but it's painful. That's the one that really the jury is out on how that's going to be modified, when it's going to be modified. The sides are barely starting to talk. So that's one that's going to be, I can't give you a timeline on that. And I know it's a question you asked me when we've talked offline, and it's a really, really hard one to answer. But there are some sectoral, they're called 232 cases. This is a part of US law that it's from the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, where you do a national security investigation on certain sectors. A lot of these sectors are ones that came up yesterday when you were talking about construction projects, when you were talking about infrastructure projects. Autos, auto parts, steel, aluminum, lumber, copper, chips, and derivatives, which means your cell phone, it means your computers, everything else. Pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, and derivatives. That means every battery you're thinking about that you might need for projects you're doing, trucks. There's different deadlines for those, but at least there's a process. And so over the next year, for all of those sectoral items, you're going to see investigations going on at the Department of Commerce, where in most cases the public comment periods are over, so we missed the window on for you or your constituents to speak out on that. But there's still, because there is an investigatory process going on at the Department of Commerce, there's at least something that's reasonably, for this administration, transparent. And some, a process to participate in as stakeholders. So I know that's a lot, but there's so much going on, and I probably left things out even at that because I needed my cheat sheet. But that's really the picture as far as what's out there, what are the timelines, what are the motivations. So hopefully that kind of lays the groundwork for what we can discuss today.
Thank you, Kellie. As Kellie mentioned, I'm the controller for the city of Pittsburgh, and when we first started this conversation, I was primarily focused on how does this impact the city of Pittsburgh's bottom line, right? Pretty basic. And in my conversation with Dave, who serves as the executive for Oakland County, which abuts Detroit in Michigan, it occurred to me how much more broad the tariff impact is, right? And I think it's particularly interesting for communities who have been so hurt by NAFTA, or we perceive to be hurt by NAFTA for the last 31 years, and here we are now sort of on the other side of the conversation. And so Dave's perspective was quite interesting during our initial conversation, because he was just talking about all these other, what I would have initially viewed as ancillary impacts, but they're really core to these local economies, particularly in Michigan or in places like Pennsylvania. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave and let him share his thoughts about what Michigan is going to do, and Oakland County in particular, in these early days, trying to figure out how to, migrate these uncertain waters.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And you know, my staff before I came here, they gave me a lot of data on how the tariffs and impacted our industries and what what billion-dollar impacts to various industries, and I was going to talk about that. But we've got experts here that are much smarter about it. And I've learned over the last 2 days that we really have to tell the story of what's happening. What's happening in a place like Michigan and Oakland County, which is a pretty prosperous and well-off county, but is really been turned on its head by not just tariffs, but the whole economic chaos and upheaval, right? And how are we trying to respond to that in order to be just resilient enough to get through the next 4 years, right? And that's really what we're trying to do. And the first thing I would say is I don't even really use the word tariff anymore because tariffs are taxes and people don't like taxes. The Republicans have drilled that into our head over the last 30 years. So I'm calling them taxes a lot more than I call them tariffs because tariffs almost sound friendly and professional. Right? So the average person is like, why are you taxing? Why are you putting these huge taxes on everything that I buy and everything that we make? Good question. Ask the president, all right? So I think it sets the tone. By the way, it's starting to work, and I just want to share with you a little good news, and that is the Detroit Free Press this morning published a poll on how well Donald Trump is doing in Michigan. And I'm embarrassed to say that, you know, Trump won Michigan by a little bit last year, but he's now underwater, 56% disapproval. So that's good news, and we can all be happy about that. It gives us a glimmer of optimism for the next election. And just as optimistic is the fact that the number one issue that they're mad at him about is the economy. So exactly what we're talking about. They don't like what he's doing to the economy. So I read that and I said, cool, all right, we're going to clobber him on this issue. Here's the other thing. Here's the other problem, though. Here's the downside. This wasn't in the poll because they were just polling him. The downside is voters have lost trust in Democrats to fix this problem. They don't think we understand what they're mad about, and we haven't offered a solution to it. So, and it didn't start with tariffs, and it didn't even start with inflation last year. This has been going on for the last couple decades, and I'm old enough to remember and know that it's seeded in things like income disparity. My wages aren't going up while the rich people's incomes are going up. This economy is not working for me. You're shipping my jobs overseas, and the trade-off was supposed to be that I get at least cheap consumer goods in return, but with inflation, we don't even get that anymore. So this isn't working for me. And I literally know people in my county and in my state who in 2016 voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary, and he won Michigan primary, and then they turned around and voted for Donald Trump in the general because, and I'm like, that blew my head. But what they wanted was a disruptor. They wanted someone who understood that this economy is not working for me. So now that I'm in this role and I have to adjust to that and I have to help convince them that I'm the first Democrat to ever be the county executive of Oakland County. Oakland County is where George and Mitt Romney are from. It's more your country club Republicans that don't like the MAGA disruption. So they voted for me, but it's a light blue county. So I had to figure out, how do I make Oakland County resilient to this stuff? How do I bring them along, knowing that I also think income disparity is a problem and that the economy doesn't work for most of us? And it's a lot of what we've been talking about over the last 2 days, but I'll just highlight a few of the things that I've talked about, the way that I talk about it. First of all, because I'm a New Deal Democrat, I can say we have balanced budgets and a AAA bond rating. I care about the budget, okay? I'm not a guy that just wants to blow up the budget and spend and give money away. We do it responsibly. But we're looking at ways to help you improve your life for your families. So one of the things I did in my first year in office in this job is I said, we're going to increase the educational attainment of the people in my county. We know that you can't have the same kind of life that your parents did with a high school diploma. In Michigan, my dad could have a really good job in a factory and make a really good wage with a high school diploma, those days are over. We know it's true, and we have to have the hard conversations with people that I can't promise you that anymore. Your high school diploma is not enough. So I asked our staff, what is the educational attainment level in Oakland County? How many people have something more than a degree or certification? It does an apprenticeship, a certified certification. We were at 61%. Which is second highest in Michigan, right behind Washtenaw County, and they cheat because they have the University of Michigan, so they have a built-in advantage. So that's why Oakland County has been successful. We have a high education attainment population. Businesses like to come there because we have that. But 60% means 40% of them don't, and they're gonna fall behind, and I can't promise them. So I got the education and business and union leaders together and said, what could we do if we all got together to help increase that? How could we do that? And we had this amazing conversation. We batted around all sorts of ideas, but ultimately they said, we can do this, we can lift that number, but Davis, you have to convene us, and you have to invest in us. You have to invest in this effort, and if you do that, we'll partner with you, and we'll do that. So we set this big, audacious goal of, by 2030, we're going to get to 80%. 80%. It's a bonus for for the companies that we're trying to attract so that they have talent and a workforce, but the way I sell it, because I'm a Democrat, is we can lift wages, you can get better jobs, you can take care of your family with this. I'm proud to say that in 4 years, we've gone from 61% in the first year of this program to later this year, we're going to announce, this is a preview, 70%. We're at 70%, and we have till 2030 to get to 80%. I think that's and I appreciate that, but I'm not asking for applause. I'm saying it's a tangible thing that we as Democrats can offer when somebody thinks this economy isn't working for them. We can say, you know what, you're right, it's not working, because this isn't your dad's economy. This isn't your grandfather's economy. It's changed. You need more skills, and we have an obligation to get you those skills and to train you up, right? Our governor's done an amazing job of doing tuition scholarships so that we don't have to do that. So where we invested our money at the local level is things like childcare and transportation and other barriers to education, because the biggest university, it's called Oakland University, no surprise, I suppose. She said, Dave, I don't have a lot of trouble getting people to enroll and get in school. I have trouble keeping them there because they don't have the safety net that we used to have. The minute the car breaks down, the minute they get pregnant, the minute mom gets sick, or they drop out and they don't come back. So if you can be in that space, that would really help. That's how we're doing it. There's a lot of other ways. I could go on and on, but I guess my bottom line is, yes, the economy isn't working for you like it should. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to offer concrete plan, not just saying tariffs are terrible and taxes are bad, because in some cases they work. In some cases they work. They don't work with Canada. That's an easy sell in Michigan to say, they're our best friends, they're our next door neighbors. Why the hell did he do that? Nobody knows. And so
they're providing our electricity.
Yeah, they provide electricity and auto parts. I mean, we have, they're our #1 trading partner, not just Michigan, the United States. And now we're treating them like they're China. It makes no sense to me. But again, with the conversation that we've had over the last 2 days, I've switched up a little bit on the details that others know better than I do. But I'm saying, as an elected official, we've got to acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the economic reality, not only say why what Donald Trump is doing is wrong, but what we can actually do to fix it. And that's what I think will be the path forward.
Yay, I know. I just want to react to that because that's amazing. And as somebody who's been toiling in the vineyards in these details, which are mind-numbing of trade policy as a Democrat for my entire career, it's very easy and it's very lazy to scapegoat trade agreements for, you lost that job because of a trade agreement. When we know it's technology, we know that we are producing different types of things. My parents were both IBEW members, and that factory doesn't exist anymore because they made telecom wire in Omaha, Nebraska, and we all have cell phones now. There's a lot of different reasons that jobs go away. There's a lot of different policy responses that need to be put into place to respond to that. It's a long list. You tacked through it just so beautifully, and I think that's the challenge, right? Is that we have, and Stacey Abrams said this yesterday, that we have fought so many of these battles using data and just, well, the statistics and the argument is here. The argument is, I don't care because that lock factory down the street that the New York Times wrote about earlier this year, the lock factory closed. And so I don't care about your data. But if we can, find a way to not just message on, but do all the things that you talked about, I mean, that's the secret sauce, but it's complicated, so we've got to make it simple.
Thank you. So one thing that's been interesting with Dave's very optimistic and energetic, I want to move to Oakland County and vote for you.
Don't run against me, and you're more than welcome.
No, but governments are right now in a period of trying to do more with less, right? So everybody in this room who works for a government or any kind of municipality, government, county, state, we were granted a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with the American Rescue Plan Act, right? Our budget in the city of Pittsburgh was inflated by about $50 million a year for the last 4 years. Those dollars are gone. So how, there are bigger economic issues that you've both alluded to that we're all facing, right? Cities are facing it, states are facing it, counties are facing it, and people are facing it, right? So they're relying more on government, but we have less, and to the extent that we're buying things, our dollar is not going as far, and that will continue at a minimum on the national level for at least the next 3 years, 9 months, and however many days. So how do you both recommend reconciling that fact, right? That we need to be proactive and we need to be both responsive to the needs of our people and looking for how to motivate folks or provide folks with opportunity. That's my big thing, is equal access to opportunity as Americans. I mean, I think that is the American dream. But how do we do that with such limited resources that we're working with now? I mean, if a big concern is when people aren't doing as well financially themselves, cities are bringing in less revenue, right? We rely on a wage tax, we rely on home sales, we rely on those things that really do impact our budgets. So how do we navigate that?
Well, I'll tell you what I did in Oakland County, because same issue. We got $244 million. I've been in politics for 20 years. I was like, it's Christmas. I can't believe it. But we have it for 3 years and then it's gone. So what do? So you can spend it on one-time things mostly, and that's what we did. But on these kinds of programs, like we used those dollars for my Oakland 80 program, and I need to do that till at least 2030, right? There were a few major important initiatives that I thought were important enough that we need to just make the initial investment, and then we've got 3 years to figure out what the runway is and how to sustain it. So Oakland 80, we have been talking to funders and others who will help us get past year 3 to get us there. Another really proud initiative that we did is for our small manufacturers. We talked to them, and instead of just giving them grants to help keep the doors open during COVID, we said, we're going to buy you a 3D printer because you guys are missing the revolution that's going on in advanced manufacturing. And you can make those little parts that you're making now that cost you $100 a piece to make for $4 if you use a 3D printer. But a lot of mom and pop shops had no idea what to do, but they fortunately, COVID, they didn't have a lot of work. They were sitting around, and we bought them 3D printers. Not everybody. We have 3,000 small manufacturers, but we bought about 300 of them, small 3D printers, and they started using them, and their eyes opened, and they thought of all the kinds of things that they could do with this printer once they figured out how to use it, more so than I could have ever imagined. And then the momentum built. And then we put it over in a nonprofit organization to help run the program. We call it Project Diamond. And they run the program now. And now we've built such momentum that now other manufacturers don't want to get left behind, and they've heard about it. So they're willing to pay for their own as long as we give them the training. Okay, so you buy your own printer, we'll give you the training. Eventually, at the end of this money, we're not going to give you anything. You're going to want to join this nonprofit organization because you don't want to get left behind. You want the printer, you want the advanced manufacturing skills, you want the training and all of that. So for us, it was about being very mindful. Some things are a one-time expense and we're done. But for those things that you need to last, be just as mindful of how you're going to sustain it, at least for a while. And there's got to be a little faith and, a leap of faith there a little bit. I don't know if we'll get all of the foundation and other private support that we need for Oakland 80, but I'm hoping. And just believe in it so much that people won't turn you down when you need money, when you need additional funds, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, all I would offer, and as not an elected official, but just looking at the policy environment right now, is, obviously stimulus dollars are not going to be forthcoming anytime soon, again, right? Secondarily, just kind of thinking through some of those sectors that I ticked through where we can expect enhanced protection beyond the tariffs that we already have, and then also thinking about anything and everything that comes from China, which I know I participated in both environmental sessions yesterday and today. A lot of that stuff still comes from China, and now it has the 145 plus tariffs. So, if the environment's going to continue, and it is going to continue to be a priority for us as Democrats, that's just something to factor in. I think what it takes is just relentless prioritization as far as when you're going to do certain projects, and if the projects that you're planning on doing entail usage of those products that are, at least in the near term, going to be facing levels of protection vis-a-vis tariffs, now might not be the time. But for those items that are, again, prioritization, for those items that are priority now that your constituents absolutely need, and you and I had this conversation, if you've got the money, if you can find the money, if you can borrow the money, buy it now. Because if they need it, the prices are only going to be going up. And I'm not saying anything that the CEO of Ford didn't say on CNBC this morning. This is the policy environment for the next 3 years. It just is. And so when budgeting, for a state, a city, or a family, that's just how we have to act.
In full disclosure, I have Kellie's quote, "If you can buy it now, on a sticky note on my desk from our earlier conversation. So it's one of the things that I've taken away from this process and learning about this is like, yeah, that's a reality, and it stinks. But if you can afford to buy it now, buy it now.
You're talking to somebody that has 3 cases of coffee in my pantry, but yeah.
So one thing, what are we not thinking about? What are the ancillary impacts, whether it's of the erratic trade tariff policy that this president is implementing, or the unfounded fiscal policy that they're pursuing? What are we not thinking about? An example I gave to Kellie last night is the city of Pittsburgh is self-insured. I don't know how many municipalities across the country are self-insured, but that means we pay the raw price for the negotiated rate for drugs. And most drugs are not manufactured in the United States, right? So if every employee or a dependent is on one prescription drug, that actually really impacts. And it's not a construction cost that goes up. It's not a price of a truck and chassis for an ambulance that goes up. It's healthcare costs. And so I'm asking both of you, what are we not thinking of that we should, whether we're factoring it in the immediate term or something that is going to, slowly, month over month, increase the cost? What are we not thinking about as it relates to this current economy?
No, go.
I'll give the first thing that I hadn't thought about that hit us in Oakland County is we're very blessed to have 5 major health systems in Oakland County. We have a lot of hospitals. And what I didn't realize is, and if you've ever been to Detroit, you'll know that on the other side of the river from Detroit is Windsor, Canada, and it's a pretty big city, 150,000 people. Turns out a lot of nurses and medical professionals live in Windsor and cross the border every day and come work in our hospitals. Border crossings are down almost 20% since the beginning of the year. People are not coming over here for various reasons. So suddenly we have another employee issue just not just hospitals, but in that, we are so integrated. And it's a small example of how it is a global economy that it's a network, and it is too simplistic to say that we could do things like a sledgehammer to the economy through tariffs and not have these other unintended consequences. There's just a whole lot of them, and we have to talk about this smarter than the Republicans do, because they've been better at it, but when you start to point out that the nurse isn't going to be there, or that the small businessman, I talked to a small business owner who sells boots, of all things. They make them handcrafted and they're really cool, but they get the leather from Mexico, and those boots are going to be double in price, and they're already kind of high end. You got to pay a lot for them now, but they're good quality craftsmen. You want to shop local, you buy these boots. The reality is a lot less people are going to buy her boots when the price gets double. And so it almost doesn't matter what industry you're talking about, since these tariffs, these taxes are so broad and across the board, there's almost no industry that's going to be exempt from it. But I think, again, what we've heard a lot over the last couple of days is our job is not to talk about the percentage increase in the leather from Mexico for her boots, but to talk about this woman that lives in your community and sells boots, and how she's probably there's a good chance she's gonna go out of business. And then what the hell is she gonna do, right? And then what's gonna happen to unemployment, and what's gonna happen when these nurses can't cross the border, and what's gonna happen when, and what's gonna happen when. A lot of we have a fairly large Hispanic population in Metro Detroit and in Oakland County. They're scared to death for very legitimate immigration reasons, and they do a lot of the jobs that other folks don't. So in almost any industry, and even not in the industries, but there are housekeepers and there are child care workers as well. And so now the place that you send your kids to go to child care doesn't have enough people so that we can't see your kid because we don't have enough staff. I mean, it doesn't take much to look around your districts and your communities and find the people who, if they haven't been impacted, very well could be, by looking at her list of, what did you call these, the reciprocal tariff list, and find an industry that is in your communities, and then talk about the shop owner, the person, the nurse, the mom that's going to absolutely be affected by it.
I love that you raised services, because I think tariffs are applied on goods typically, and so we think about manufacturing. I get frustrated that typically folks will assume everything's a finished good. No. So many of these, if you look at the data, it's hopefully I'm remembering this number right, that it's about 2/3 of our imports are either capital goods that go into U.S. production, or they're inputs for U.S. production. It's only that last third that's finished consumer goods, those dolls and pencils that the president keeps talking about. So that 2/3 impacts our ability to be productive, our ability to grow our services tech and our manufacturing production. But the real impact, and just yesterday we saw a move, it hasn't been officialized yet, to try to tariff based on services and intellectual property, the U.S. Film industry. I think breaking the seal on trying to tariff on services, that does put us into a whole new world as far as potential retaliation. I'm already worried. Most countries, only Canada and China up to now, have retaliated. Most countries are kind of hoping that the United States will feel the economic pain of these tariffs and adjust, as you've seen with some of the, on again, off again, nature of some of these tariffs. And I think so countries are, for the most part, either going to try to negotiate it out or wait it out. And that's why most countries haven't retaliated. I don't know for how long that lasts. I do worry about U.S. retaliation. I'm from Nebraska. Our Aggies are already getting hit by the retaliation. I see my Iowa friend here. I mean, this is real. Farmers get this. I think messaging on the retaliation risks in the right way is going to be critically important going forward. But also, we might see retaliation against U.S. services. We might see retaliation against U.S. intellectual property. What does that mean? That means we're not going to let your U.S. film that was filmed in Georgia with the tax incentives that this state offers into our country. And most U.S. filmmakers make most of their money overseas. That means our tech companies might not be allowed to operate. Again, I don't want to be dire or, disaster provoking, but I mean, these are just, as far as what to think about, as far as economic ramifications going forward, these are things we need to understand. You know, they aren't reality today, but they could be reality. We have to plan for it, and we have to advocate to try to prevent them from occurring.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you. I think now we're going to turn to Q&A from the audience. Anybody?
Hi there. Thank you all. My name is Meiman. I'm from Iowa. I'm a state legislator there. And I really appreciated your discussion. And you were just touching on this, Kellie, both in your first opening answer to a question as well as now. I'm very concerned about our impact of the retaliation, especially when we're looking at, for instance, China. We have a lot of soybean exports there. And so our agricultural production is really at risk. And we're worried about, is this going to bring us to a farm crisis like something in the 1980s? How best do we prepare for something that we're probably going to see an impact starting to happen when we start to see soybean and corn prices really becoming narrowed come this fall? And how long do we see this impact happening? What can we do at the state level to mitigate that impact and help sustain our communities?
Honestly, the breadth of the tariffs, it's so broad, and the tariffs against China are so high. You really can't mitigate against the level of retaliation that might be coming. And retaliation, if you look at any commercial dispute going back decades, and you know this if you're from Iowa, farmers get hit first. It's the easiest one. There's farms in every state. Countries know that. That's where they always apply the pain. So to my mind, you know, it's not like this, you know, last time we were just fighting with China, last time Trump 1.0, we were just fighting with China. So soybean farmers, corn farmers, the Brazilians were psyched. They sold all their soybeans to China. They were really happy. And our farmers had to look for other markets. We don't have that luxury this time. So I truly believe that farmers need to raise their voices, that local officials, you all need to raise your voices. Whenever I present on this, I talk about guardrails, kind of what could change? What are the guardrails that would lead to this policy changing? And, you know, the division of powers should be the guardrails. Again, in the previous panel, they talked about, I mean, lawyers are doing a great job. The courts will do their job, but it's slow. Congress hasn't, you know, been much more than a speed bump, if that, with respect to these policies. We'll see if that changes as the pain increases. But if you go down, you know, foreign countries' retaliation might be a guardrail. The markets, we'll see, bond markets for sure, stock market, not clear. But for me, the most important guardrails are public opinion. And public opinion expressed by your constituents, and public opinion expressed by you to your national leaders. But I really think that grassroots is the only way to communicate around the pain that communities are and will continue to feel due to these policies. Because thus far, that and the bond markets appear to be the two things that are working in the short term. I do think the courts, and there are multiple lawsuits against the IEPA is the part of law. It's the Emergency Powers Act from 1977 that's being used to justify a number of these tariffs. There are a number of legal battles. There's over 7, if I'm not wrong, that are going on. We'll see how long those take to win through. But I think it's really interesting. You're talking about retailers. You know, a number of the cases that have been taken and the first case that was taken, I love this. It's by a woman-owned company. It's a stationery and like date book company out of Florida, because she designs everything, she markets everything, she distributes everything, but everything's printed in China. And she's like, my business is gone because of this. And so having those voices channeled in an effective way, and again, a way that speaks to hear, not to hear, to me is the only way to move the needle.
And I just want to quickly add, because I know you all have planes to catch. You started that answer by saying there's nothing you can do to mitigate it, and I leaned over and I said, well, that's depressing. We're elected officials. We're trying to mitigate stuff. But then you offered a really good assessment of the scope and what we can do. So I'm going to give you just a short political
Make
answer.
the tariffs go away.
And make the tariffs go away. But the other thing I would just leave you with is, just because we're New Deal leaders, we're pragmatic, we're willing to work across the aisle, just because we're that doesn't mean we can't be bold. And we may have been a little traumatized by the last election. We might be a little depressed. We might have had our heads down for a minute or two. But the next election is on the horizon. We've learned so much over the last 2 days, and we have to be bold. And you in Iowa, or if it's me in Michigan, or Pittsburgh, whatever the issue in industry or person that's being attacked and jeopardized in your community, let's leave here bold. Bold in our pragmatism. Can you be a bold pragmatist? I think you can. And that's what I'm going to go back and do.
Well, that wraps up everything for today. So thank you both. Thank you for the engaging questions. And this has been an awesome experience. And I have learned a lot, and I hope you all can say the same. So thank you. And everybody, take care.